A lot of you I know, some new faces, but I want to welcome you all. I'm Anna Pachias. I'm the Director of Leadership Giving at the Shenandoah National Park Trust, which is the official philanthropic partner of Shenandoah National Park, as many of you know. And I think many of you also know that our mission is to enhance, protect, and preserve the natural and cultural resources of Shenandoah now and for future generations. And that means that we fund a wide variety of projects from education to trail maintenance and much, much more. I'm going to give you two quick examples because I don't want to take time away from our speakers. One example is we fund a volunteer coordinator position, and this person is embedded in the park and is the liaison for all volunteering. And this position facilitated over 2,000 volunteer hours last year. So I think that's amazing. And another cool thing that we do is our Access to the Outdoors Fund, where we strategically partner with community nonprofit groups. And one of my favorites is Soul Track Outdoors, which is based in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to empowering underrepresented communities by creating high quality, accessible outdoor experiences. And so this summer is going to be our third year bringing the Soul Track folks into the park. Lots of young people learning about green careers and communing with nature and thinking of themselves as environmental stewards and developing their leadership skills. So those two examples show you that we are all about collaboration, and that's our theme tonight as well. So we're going to learn about how the park collaborates with the trust, and we're going to learn about how the park collaborates with Old Rag Mountain Stewards. And we will have time for Q&A after everybody's presentations, but as questions occur to you, put them in the chat because we're monitoring that, and we will make sure your questions get asked. And now I would like to introduce three very special guests. Logan Tucker, wave for us, Logan, from Shenandoah National Park. Andy Nichols, founder of Old Rag Mountain Stewards. And Emily Larkin, longtime volunteer with Old Rag Mountain Stewards, which I'm going to refer to as ORMS sometimes. So I just want you all to know what that means. And I also want to shout out to Andy Nichols, who lives in the country, lost power, lost Wi-Fi, and has been valiantly traversing his community looking for an internet connection. So thumbs up on that. So first, let me introduce Logan Tucker. He is currently the acting supervisory ranger and search and rescue coordinator at Shenandoah National Park. As part of his search and rescue duties, Logan serves as a technical rescue instructor, park medic, wildland firefighter, and project aviation manager. And locally, he's also a volunteer structural firefighter. After college, Logan began working as a waterfowl biologist and became a park ranger in 2011. And prior to Shenandoah, he was in Yosemite. And he worked there as a search and rescue coordinator, as well as a horse program coordinator. And I just love saying those words, Logan. While at Yosemite, Logan met his wife, who's an active duty major in the United States Marine Corps. And when she was transferred to DC, they made the Shenandoah Valley their home. And we are so glad that you are here, giving us your time and your talent. Welcome, Logan.
We are happy to be here. Thank you for having us, Anna. So, few talking points. Basically, I would like to open with what is the mandate of search and rescue in Shenandoah National Park. The search and rescue program in Shenandoah National Park is responsible for ensuring the safety of visitors while protecting the park's natural resources. Our primary objectives include rapid response to emergencies, from lost hikers to serious injuries. Our teams operate across rugged and remote terrain. Also incredibly important is preventative search and rescue, which is educating visitors on safe hiking practices, gear recommendations, and route planning before an emergency even happens. And then always important, resource stewardship, which is balancing emergency response with conservation efforts to minimize environmental impact. And with over 1.7 million visitors annually and visitation on the rise, search and rescue operations are an essential function within the park's mission to provide a safe and accessible wilderness experience. A few challenges currently faced by the SAR division. Despite our commitment to safety, SAR faces increasing challenges, including a rising call volume. We're getting more visitors, which means a higher rate of incidents requiring SAR response. Many involve unprepared hikers who underestimate trail difficulty, weather conditions, or even their own abilities. Limited resources. SAR is not a dedicated budget line item, and we never ever charge for our services: ambulance, search and rescue, helicopter extraction, nothing. Meaning we operate with available funding, grants, and partnerships to sustain operations every year. Staffing and training needs. Our rangers are multi-role professionals, which is very unique in the federal service. We balance law enforcement, firefighting, emergency medical response, search and rescue, and conservation efforts. And maintaining high-level training is both time and cost intensive. Environmental factors. We're in the mountains. Weather conditions, trail erosion, and wildlife-related incidents create unpredictable hazards that complicate rescue operations. More and more people are relying on technology. Many hikers overestimate the reliability of cell phones. Shenandoah National Park has very little cell phone coverage. They rely on electronic GPS devices or digital maps, which they've downloaded to their phones or another peripheral, which can lead to navigation errors and false assumptions about rescuability. Despite all these challenges, our SAR team continue to uphold the highest standards of search and rescue operations while continuing working within the restraints of our available resources. Now, with Shenandoah National Park Trust, they play a critical role in enhancing our SAR operations. Their support has allowed us to invest in essential equipment, including technical rescue gear, medical equipment, communication tools, all things that improve our response efficiency and abilities. Expanding ranger training opportunities, as I mentioned before, ensuring SAR personnel receive specialized instruction in wilderness medicine, technical rescue, and search strategy is very, very important. Supporting preventative search and rescue efforts, or PSAR, by funding educational materials, signage, and outreach programs that help visitors make safer choices before entering the backcountry, we can stop these emergencies before they even happen. Improving interagency coordination by facilitating partnerships between SAR teams, volunteer organizations, and local emergency response agencies. It provides a better customer service experience for our visitors, and you guys play a huge part in that. Without the trust support, our ability to provide timely and effective rescues would be significantly hindered. These contributions directly translate into lives saved and offer a safer experience for anybody that visits Shenandoah National Park. Regarding specific challenges at Old Rag Mountain. Old Rag is one of the most popular and challenging hikes in the entire region. It draws tens of thousands of visitors a year. It presents very specific SAR challenges, including difficult terrain. The rock scramble is very unique. It has high exposure areas, uneven footing, and it leads to a high incidence of falls and extremity injuries. A lot of these people are unprepared. Many hikers begin the trail without adequate water, proper footwear, or an understanding of the strenuous hike that they're about to encounter. Like I said before, limited communications, cellular and radio coverage is spotty or non-existent in key areas, which complicates SAR coordination and response times. Sudden weather shifts. The weather is often different at the top of Old Rag versus the valley. These high elevation changes mean rapidly changing weather conditions, increasing risk. A lot of people don't plan for variable weather conditions. Most of all, challenging evacuations. Carrying an injured person off Old Rag could take 6+ hours, and helicopter extractions are only possible under specific conditions and with highly specialized training. Addressing these challenges requires proactive safety education, well-coordinated SAR responses, and a strong partnership with local organizations. Our partnership with Old Rag Mountain Stewards is vital in proactively promoting safety and reducing SAR incidents. ORMS is a volunteer-based organization that plays an active role in on-trail engagement and education. ORMS members interact directly with hikers, which oftentimes I don't and we don't get a chance to do. They advise them on trail difficulty, proper hydration, and safe navigation. Their presence helps reduce preventable rescues by ensuring visitors are better informed before they reach hazardous areas or put themselves in harm's way. First response assistance. Many ORMS volunteers are trained in wilderness first aid and SAR techniques, allowing them to provide immediate first care and assess situations before park rangers arrive, if more advanced medical intervention is even needed. This significantly improves response times and patient outcomes. Communication and coordination. ORMS assists in relaying information from remote areas of Old Rag, especially in regions with limited radio coverage, if a SAR becomes a much larger operation. These abilities provide real-time updates and enhance our SAR planning and efficiency abilities. These guys are a huge benefit to our program. Trail maintenance and risk reduction. ORMS works in collaboration with the NPS to preserve trail conditions through PSAR. This mitigates erosion and helps us identify hazards, reducing the likelihood of injuries caused by unstable footing or trail degradation. These guys are eyes and ears on the ground, and I can't say enough good things about them. Our collaboration with ORMS not only enhances visitor safety, but also maximizes our SAR team's efficiency, allowing rangers to focus on critical events and incidents and other required duties, while ORMS provides essential preemptive support, allows us to focus elsewhere in the park. In conclusion, SAR in Shenandoah National Park is a mission-critical function. This ensures visitors can explore the park safely and responsibly. However, this work cannot be done alone. What continued support means for SAR is faster and more effective emergency responses, enhanced prevention efforts to reduce the number of rescues, sustained collaboration between ORMS and other SAR teams, and the Shenandoah National Park Trust and the National Park Service itself. Your ongoing support directly saves lives and improves the safety of both visitors and rescuers, and I thank you guys for being here tonight.
Well, Logan, thank you for that compelling presentation. It was really clear. You outlined it really well. I know there's a lot of technical stuff that you do. So thank you for being so clear. Thank you for being here. And thank you for your service to our national parks.
We thank you for supporting us.
And you will all have a chance to ask Logan questions later. Now I would like to introduce you to Andy Nichols, our second speaker, who is the owner of Shenandoah Mountain Guides and the founder of Old Rag Mountain Stewards. And just a little bit about Andy. He is a true native son. He grew up in Rappahannock County, and his mother's family were some of the first settlers in the Shenandoah Valley almost 250 years ago. And Andy has been climbing and exploring the park since he could walk, which is about 60 years now, right, Andy? And he's the creator and director of the Old Rag Mountain Stewards program. And he's also a volunteer instructor for the NPS Technical Rescue Program. He is a retired Navy commander, and in 2017, Blue Ridge Outdoors magazine selected him as an outdoor legend. Thank you for being here, and sorry you had to chase internet access all over the valley, but we're glad to see you.
You know, it's funny. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're okay, loud and clear. Yep.
Good. I love living in the mountains, but boy, does it have its challenges when you lose, Terry goes down on the lines and you lose everything. So growing up in Rappahannock County, I got to see Old Rag Mountain pretty much every day, whether I wanted to or not. On my way to school, on my way home from school. And thank you for that gracious comment about being 60 years old. I'm much, much closer to 70. I started hiking Old Rag when I was a kid in the mid 60s, I would say. And the first time I remember, encountering other people specifically, there was a group up there on probably their first hike. I might have been 11 years old or 12 years old, and they were stuck without lights. And we they said, we said, follow us down. We led them on down. And the more I was on Old Rag, I started rock climbing on Old Rag in the late 60s and early 70s, some of the first people climbing there. And we saw more and more and more people, running into situations like that. And Old Rag got more and more popular. When I finished my time in the Navy, I realized that, my knowledge of this area was something very special that a lot of people don't have, and my willingness to teach. I also teach at the college that I taught at for a long time also. That's where I'm using the internet tonight. But in the early 2000s, it was noted that there was a lot of incredible use, exponential growth of use of particularly the rock outcrops in Shenandoah National Park. And it led to the proposal of something called the ROMP, the Rock Outcrop Management Plan. And what that was going to do was, it was definitely needed because of the sensitive vegetation and also the heavy visitor use, but it was going to place a lot of places, a lot of treasured places off limits of use. And understanding the situation, I met with a guy, the backcountry manager, his name was Steve Bear. And we met for a long time talking about this, saying, okay, what really has to happen here? And it wasn't because people were maliciously hurting the resources. It was just lack of knowledge. And so I said, Steve, how about if instead of, having a uniformed presence there, if we could, volunteers can go out and interact with the public, it's a little bit less imposing, and we can provide it as an educational basis. So it started off with my staff and I. We're all wilderness EMTs, and we're all Leave No Trace master educators. So we're pretty comfortable teaching this stuff. And so the first thing we did was we started going up there every weekend. We wound up interacting with senators who will remain nameless and their staff, and all sorts of people just doing just dumb things that most of everybody on this podcast or webcast tonight would assume as common sense, but they just didn't know it. And so we started teaching. Along with that, people, we wound up having people getting hurt, and I said, gosh, this is something that we could probably help out as well. And that was not our original calling. Our original calling was just leave no trace. Let's not hammer the resource. And so, sorry for the background noise. I'm at the student center.
No apology necessary, Andy. You were a champion tonight.
So what we started doing is, when we realized that when people would get hurt on Old Rag, a lot of times there was no medical training whatsoever, and they wouldn't be able to assess the patient. They weren't able to assess the conditions, and they would simply run down and place a phone call, say somebody's hurt on Old Rag, and then somebody would have to respond, and that would take another 3 or 4 hours. They would assess the situation, then they call for help. So it was taking up to 24, 25 hours to get assistance for somebody who might be hurt. So we said, well, can we expand it a little bit and just provide a little bit of patient assessment and situational assessment so that we can communicate via radio to the park and call in resources as needed. Well, that worked out pretty well, and things expanded. So in 2005, we really started off with this program, and it was modeled kind of off of the White Mountain Stewards up in New Hampshire. Steve Bear connected us with them, and we put together a whole handbook, a whole thing. And then we said, now we need volunteers. And so Emily, who's going to be on this call, and her husband, and then Ann Ricciuti, another person who's no longer with us, they were some of the first people that said, hey, this sounds like it's really cool. And they've been with us a long time. And I think it's made a significant difference. And it's cool because, being able to share my knowledge of both technical skills, climbing and rescue, and that is, as well as cultural and natural knowledge, who lived here, what are the plants, what are the animals, and, what's it like, what's been the history of the area. And it's been phenomenal. It's been great. It's a great opportunity for people to get involved because it's really kind of a Uber hiker sort of thing. It's wonderful. And so in the past few years, I've kind of backed out a little bit more because I am, reaching that magic 70-year mark. but Emily and Michael and Scott and all the other folks are carrying on, and I can't imagine any better people. I'm still teaching. I still teach in the park. I'm still, still Shenandoah mountain guiding, and I still get up on Old Rag probably no more than about 10 or 15 times a year, which is a lot for a lot of people, but compared to 80, what I used to do. But it's a wonderful thing. And
What an
that's about all
awesome
I've got.
story.
Yeah,
That
it's
is,
great.
that's
It's great.
beautiful. It's nice to hear the genesis of the program and also to hear what search and rescue was like before. And again, we're seeing this collaboration, and it's just fascinating. And so now, to add to Andy's wonderful story of the history of Old Rag Mountain Stewards, I'd like to introduce Emily Larkin, who is an ORMS board member and a steward herself, who volunteers quite often on the mountain. She's been volunteering since 2008, and she got involved in the program after meeting and chatting with Andy on Old Rag. Surprise, surprise. Initially, she joined ORMS to give back to the park that she loves and to strengthen her outdoor skills. And over the years, she's learned that one of the best things about ORMS is the amazing people who are involved. Emily lives in College Park, Maryland, with her husband, Michael, who's also an ORMS volunteer. And when she's not hiking or volunteering, she enjoys photography, bird watching, and knitting. Emily, welcome.
Thank you, Anna. Just a quick correction. I'm not actually a board member. I'm just a longtime volunteer.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
I bet there are people trying to recruit you to be a board member.
Yes, and I keep dodging and weaving. So Anna and Andy are correct. I bumped into actually initially some of Andy's employees at the time, and it was the first fall that they were recruiting for volunteers in 2008, and I actually argued with them over something. And then later in the mountain, and that won't surprise Andy at all. Later in the hike on the other side of the summit, I bumped into Andy and I asked him questions because he was wearing his tech rescue training shirt. So I thought he was park personnel. So I asked him some questions and he was like, hey, we're recruiting for this program. And it sounded pretty exciting. And I thought I knew a lot about the outdoors and had great outdoor skills then. And the truth of the matter is I thought I knew a lot more than I did. And we got involved that first fall, and boy, the learning curve was fast and steep, and it was great. And met some amazing people that we're still friends with today, who are not necessarily in the area anymore, but still friends with today. And to talk about our role on the mountain, and I really want to emphasize that we're not a replacement for the uniform rangers that in Logan's role or his employees' role. We're really there as the eyes and the ears of the park on the mountain. 99% of what we do is we walk the mountain, we walk the trail, we talk to people, and we suggest that the water bottle they brought in should go home with them, or that have you considered today that it's going to be pretty hot, so maybe we should have more than one water bottle, those kinds of things. And then if something does happen, we assess the situation. We communicate that to the park, and it's really people in Logan's role that make the decisions about what happens next if it's in a situation that needs more intervention. One of the great benefits of what we do is that we can take minor situations that, somebody turns an ankle and they call the park, and it can take the park a number of hours. A park ranger might be working an incident at Big Meadows, which is an 1.5-hour drive from Old Rag. And we can go and say, we talked to the person and they feel a little bit better now and they think they can walk out. That saves the park a ton of time. Or we can say, they have symptoms they can't put weight on it, and they don't seem to be able to move very fast. So we may need to do something more here, but the park makes that decision about what that something more is. So that's a huge benefit. I mean, an example of that in my case was I was working with another volunteer late one evening, and we were headed down the rock scramble opposite the direction that most people hike it. We do that partly when it's getting dark out in the fall, because we can kind of catch people as they're coming up and talk to them and say, hey, it's 4 o'clock, sun's going down at 5:30. Do you have lights with you? And you're still got 3 hours left of hiking or 2 hours left of hiking. And we ran into this group, and this young man was, he was tired and he was scared because he was afraid of heights, and his friends had convinced him to come on this hike, kind of getting to the not really prepared for the experience he was going to have. And he hadn't eaten since lunchtime. It's like 5 o'clock. And so, you know, I don't know about how the rest of you get when you haven't eaten in 5 hours and you're physically exercising, but his mood was not in the best place. And so, you know, we talked to him and we're like, okay, let's, you know, why don't we eat a bar, right? He's like, well, I'm not really hungry. I was like, I know, it's been a long time since you've eaten though, so let's go ahead and eat a bar. And he did, and like, we're going to walk out with you and it's all going to be okay, and we're going to get through all this. And we walked him out, and he was at a point when we reached him where he was like, I don't think I can do this, and he did it. And that made his experience better in the sense of he didn't spend a night on a mountain. His friends didn't have to call the park. And you know, he ended up sort of being like, okay, I could do this. I don't want to do it again, but I could do this. Another example of what we do that I think, you know, it's a much more positive thing is wildlife interactions, which we had a situation where we were hiking again opposite direction of most people because we kind of hear what's going on above us further on the trail. And we can't start hearing people talking about a bear. And so we're like, okay, so we get up there and there's this little teenage bear who is just doing his bear thing. He's near the trail and he's not paying people any mind. And pardon me, I have to cough for a moment. But people are just kind of around, right? And so we stood there and we talked to people and we said, you know, you can watch him, you can take pictures, but you can't leave the trail. And if he starts to approach the trail, we're going to make noise, and we're going to give him his space, right? And it was magical. People were entranced. You know, I see bears in Shenandoah pretty regularly, but most people don't see bears, right? And they got to just watch him doing, you know, turning over rocks and doing his bear thing. And then once he started kind of like moving towards the trail, we all made noise and we made, you know, and we convinced him to go the other way. But that turned a situation where people could have, just out of not knowing, approached the bear, turned into something that was much less positive. It turned it into something where people really got to experience kind of something really unique in Shenandoah. So that's kind of what we do. We provide a lot of training, and I want to thank the Park Trust and for Andy Nichols for supporting some of that training, and for supporting some of the equipment that we've needed, such as radios to interact with the park. We do self-organized training weekends where we go over some of those principles of wilderness first aid. We go over park procedures. We do training on the mountain itself and some of the cultural history. And we do join, where we have the opportunity to, we join some of the training that Logan's team runs. For some of the Shensar training, we've sent people to the tech rescue training that the Park Service runs. Old Rag is a really unique place, and I've worked a number of carryouts. Logan's exactly right. Andy's exactly right. It is a huge effort. It takes a lot of people and it takes a lot of time. We try to prevent that as much as we can. And I will say more about, you know, Old Rag being a unique place. There is not one thing that would surprise me on that mountain anymore. I have seen yoga classes, I have seen church services, I've seen engagements, I've seen weddings, I've seen the range of footwear from none to high heels. Excuse me one moment. Apologies, I just got a tickle in my throat. So it is an interesting and unique place. I think there's some great things about that, and that it attracts people who might not be interested in going out on a hike another place. So this is kind of their first entry into Shenandoah National Park. And, you know, one of the changes that we've seen over the years are, you know, it attracts a more diverse crowd of hikers than any other hike that almost than you know, except right in the middle of the DC area that I've seen. So yeah, that's kind of where we are with Old Rag Mountain Stewards.
What is the typical number of hours that a steward volunteers per month or per year?
So we ask people who are not in a leadership position to volunteer 2 days in our spring season and 2 days in our fall season. So it's not a really heavy volunteer requirement. And then we have some training weekends in addition to that. A typical day starts at 10 a.m. And if it is an uneventful day, it ends around 5:30, 6 p.m. If we have an incident that happens, it tends to end when the work is done, and that can be quite late. The latest one I've ever finished up was around 1 a.m. So that just depends on how the day goes.
And what's one of the most dangerous rescues that either you or another ORMS member has navigated?
The one that I would say the most dangerous one that I have worked was, we had a young woman who had a very eventful night the night before. She was her birthday, she celebrated, and had not eaten since the night before, had indulged quite a bit. We got the call at 4:30 p.m. in November after daylight savings time that we had a non-ambulatory hiker. And we got confirmation that she was genuinely non-ambulatory as the sun dropped below the ridge. Temperatures were dropping into the high 20s. And she was in the very middle of the rock scramble. So in the most technical place that she could have been without being a climber. And we worked that rescue until 1 a.m., having to set anchors, having to carry her and pass her through all of the hard parts of the rock scramble. And it was a very long night. It was dangerous because it was dark, it was cold. We were concerned about keeping her warm enough to basically stay alive. Because she didn't, if you've ever been very sick, you know that it's hard to regulate your temperature. She didn't have any calories in her. She wasn't keeping herself warm. She didn't have a lot of clothing. Her friends didn't have much clothing. So on top of that, we had the risk of 2 additional patients and her friends if we could not keep them moving and keep them warm. And having to set anchors and make sure that we were moving her in a safe way that kept all of the volunteers safe was the most challenging rescue I've ever worked. There have been some other ones that had other challenges, but that's the one I've worked that's been the hardest.
Yeah. Andy, did you want to add something to that? Because you just popped up on my screen again.
He worked it with us.
Yeah, I would.
You
agree.
were there?
And that was kind of like a graduation ceremony for all these, some of the first volunteers. Emily and Michael, her husband. The whole thing was roped. This woman was in a litter, and Michael and Emily stepped up to the plate, and it was one of those things that you never forget. And it was very involved. I mean, we drafted people from all over the place to help out with that one.
It sounds very intense. And both of you talked about some changes that have happened. Andy, you've been on this mountain for 50 plus years. Emily, not as long, but you're there a lot. And you both mentioned that there's increased visitation and there's a more diverse audience. Any other changes you've seen over this period?
The permit system has been one of the biggest changes that I think it's been a very positive change. From my opinion as a volunteer, and I'm only speaking for my, as a volunteer, I think that has improved visitor experience once people get over the initial hurdle of actually realizing they need a permit. When that first went in, people were kind of grumpy about it, and we talked to them and we were like, so last year at this time, if you would have been here, you would have waited in line for an hour and a half at various places. Today, how long did you wait? And they were like, oh, about 10 minutes. So I think that's been a real positive. I know it is a challenge for access for some folks, but the numbers we were seeing before that were really crazy.
Wow. Andy?
The biggest change for me, besides the over-the-top visitation, has been the amount of vandalism. People dropping trash, people, painting on rocks, and again, I used to say it was due to not understanding and knowing outdoor skills. Some of the things that are done are just deliberate anymore, and it's as Emily said, nothing surprises you anymore. But I wish something would surprise me a little bit and have that be something clean instead of so much incredible vandalism. Trees being chopped down with axes, oil cans of oil being deposited at the summit. People moving rocks, people making their own trails. If somebody gets hurt and it's a social trail that nobody knows about, people are you're not gonna find them. If somebody says, well, they're hurt up there, well, where? And it's not an established trail. So it's a challenge.
Yeah. We have a question in the chat from Irina. How is your relationship with rock climbers that come out to Old Rag? Andy, it looks like you want to go first.
I would love to go first. Being a climber and being somebody who's climbed on Old Rag since, like I said, since the late 1960s. For the most part, I am glad to see climbers out there. Climbers aren't. I'm going out on a limb here. Everybody thinks the climbers are the problem. It's not climbers that are the problem. Most climbers really know what they're doing. And, we talk a little bit about some of the sensitive vegetation, but, as long as you're not going down as the man, so to speak, it's pretty good. The climbers are not really the issue. And I like to think the climbers are some of the best stewards.
Wow.
I would agree. I think we haven't had too much. The only issue we've had with some of the climbers is the ones who are not educated about the closed area on the West Summit. But beyond that, and usually they're receptive to that. If we go and we say, look, the fencing's here for a reason, it's for, and explain it, usually people are pretty receptive. But beyond that, climbers they're out there. They tend to have a higher level of outdoor skill than many of the folks out there. I mean, if I'm going to speak with a broad brush, and I would say our relationship with them is fine.
Well, that's great.
I feel like I don't see them as many as I used to.
Huh. I wonder about that.
Yeah.
I would like, stay close. I'd like to bring a question to Logan that someone on the staff wanted to ask, which was, Logan, what drew you to this specific type of work? And what about the park or the people inspires you every day? This is hard work that you're doing. So we're just a little more about you who are serving our national parks every day.
My entire family, it comes from helpers. My father was a structural firefighter until he was injured, and then he went back to school and became a mechanical engineer, and he built fire trucks, and he just recently retired. My mother was a registered nurse in the ER and then became a school nurse and just recently retired. My sister is a flight medic for a major air ambulance company in the Midwest. I've always wanted to help people that can't help themselves. I mean, my day job may be someone's best day they've ever had or the worst day they've ever had. It's a toss-up, but like my calling is to be there for whatever they need.
Wow. You're all serving in some way in your family. That's amazing and not surprising. We have another question in the chat from Lisa. When search and rescue is activated to find a missing person, for example, are most of the people responding employees, volunteers, or a mix of both? Or is there a typical formula?
It's kind of hit the big red button and who shows up, shows up. I mean, that's the best way I can put it. During the day, it tends to be a lot of employees, but if the sun's down, I find it tends to be a lot more volunteers, to be honest.
Wow. All right, we've got another one. Let me read this to you. I got my WFR last year and have been interested in finding a place where I can help, but have to admit, without ongoing training, a lot of what we learned in that intense experience becomes rusty. Can you talk a little bit about your training for volunteers and how do we volunteer for you? What do you need from volunteers? You read my mind, Tim. Thank you. That was one I was going to ask too about recruiting people. Who are you looking for? Yeah.
We are looking for, so you're exactly right. If you don't use those skills, they get a little bit rusty. So we do a lot of training on mountain. So if you're volunteering for the day and there is not an ongoing active incident, we're going to do a lot of training to review a lot of those skills, because You come out of your first WUFA or WUFR class and you feel like you know a lot, and then a year later you're like, whoa, I don't remember all of that. So we do a lot of that stuff. And
can you remind us what WFR stands for? Wilderness
First Responder.
Got it.
And WFA is Wilderness First Aid, which is a much shorter class. So we actually don't require people come in with training. We will provide the training for volunteers in good standing, and we'll subsidize Wilderness First Aid for volunteers who are in good standing. And then we'll follow up on Wilderness First Aid is a 2-year certification. On the off year, we do our own training weekends so that we can kind of keep those skills fresh, and also it helps you work together as a team. We really need people with common sense and problem solving ability and the ability to work with others. That's a huge thing. There's a ton of different personalities, and we need people who can play well with others. So how do you join us? We have a website that hopefully Anna can have someone put in the chat. Old Rag Mountain Stewards website. There's a link on there. You can join. You can also, on Instagram, we are Old Rag Mountain Stewards, and you can do a message to that account, and the person who responds will get you hooked up for volunteering. And we typically ask people is come out, walk along with us for a day and see if you like it. See if this group seems like it's the right fit for you. It's the right fit for most people, but sometimes people are like, this doesn't work with my schedule, that kind of thing. So we understand if it's not, but yeah, come out. We'd love to have you. We'd love to have you come along.
Andy, before you add what you want to add, I will just say, Molly just put the website in the chat. However, this will be in our follow-up email, the website and the contact info, so that people who are interested in volunteering can do so. And we have some ORMS members on the call, so I know they're excited to see if people would like to join them. Andy.
I would like to add and say that the intermittent trainings that we have during the year, we'll have usually two training weekends, and I'm not as involved as I used to be, like I said, but it's just so much fun. I mean, they're like-minded people. We have people that are physicians, we have people that are nurses, we have people that are PAs, we have EMTs, and there's no judgment about anybody. It's like we're all here and we're going to lift each other up by improving each other's skills, and it's fun. It's funny. It's fun. It's a ton of fun. And
I started with nothing. Like I came in, I had never had Wilderness First Aid. I didn't know hardly anything at the time. So you can come in and you can, with that level of baseline, and you can learn the skills. And if your job on a rescue is to go get water for the other rescuers because it's 90 degrees, that's a critical role on a rescue. And I have been that person. So
awesome. Andy, you finished?
Yeah, that's basically it. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, because Emily interrupted you, and
Emily
and I interrupt one another. I've known her for 4 years now, but you guys have known each other for what? A decade? 2 decades?
A long time.
Okay,
long time,
yeah.
Probably 2. Yeah.
So the two of you can really go at it. Yeah. Logan, another personal question for you. We're going to force you to be contemplative this evening. This is challenging work. We've said that, both mentally and physically. How do you care for yourself after a particularly stressful day or rescue or month?
Personally, I find like woodworking, carpentry, gardening very cathartic. Just getting my hands dirty that way. Other people deal with stress in different ways. Any kind of critical incident issues that we have, we have like critical incident stress management protocols. We have other avenues available for employees to seek out professional help. We have peer supporters on staff that are in the law enforcement division as well as other divisions. I mean, we're always there to help each other out. Sometimes the job is not easy and it is very stressful, but we do everything we can do to support each other every step of the way.
That's wonderful. I didn't know that there were institutional, I mean, it makes sense, but there are institutional checks and balances for you, and I'm relieved to hear that. Quick question for Andy and or Emily. Do you need to fundraise for Old Rag Mountain Stewards? And if so, how do you do that? I mean, there is some cost. I know you're all volunteers, but, and I know the trust has helped in the past, but only recently.
Historically, it was funded by me for a long time. Shenandoah Mountain Guides funded the program. We believed in it. We funded it a lot. You all did provide, I mean, the trust provided our first big rescue box up there with the cash. That was great. I took a picture of it, and there's a little sticker on there and everything. Increasingly, and Emily can address this, when a nonprofit becomes kind of a fundraising, or it has to have a fundraising organization, I tend to back out because that's not as much fun for me as just doing stuff. So, Emily can address the rest of that. But I think it's pretty much any support that they can get would be very helpful, I think. And the trust, you guys are great.
Well, we love you guys. Emily.
We have a tiny annual operating budget. We have no paid staff. Our board members do it out of the goodness of their heart. And so our biggest expenses tend to be equipment. And when the Park Service upgraded the radio system a year or two ago, we needed to buy radios, and the Park Trust funded that for us, which was huge because it wasn't, in terms of the Park Trust budget, it was a very small amount. In terms of our budget, it was a very large amount. And so we do take donations. On that website, there is a donation link. We do tend to do social media sort of donation campaigns, and we're very grateful for even the smallest donation that we get. $5 or $10 is great. That's some extra supplies. That's water treatment tablets that we can buy. And we're pretty frugal with our money and try not to take on a lot of additional expenses, especially fixed expenses.
Wow, that's helpful. Yeah, you really maybe want to think about being a board member, Emily. Jab, jab. I know there's a board member on the call who I will not call out, but he can thank me later. And maybe you can, and Andy can speak to this, but you, Emily, who are closer to the organization now, what kind of long-term, long-range planning do you do for ORMS? And is there a plan to grow it? And how would you go about doing that?
So there is sort of discussions of, right now we cover, and we've expanded a little bit. We cover May through the end of July. We take a break in August, and we cover some weekends in September through the beginning of December. And that's a little bit expanded from where we've been historically. We really need people for that. We would like to get August covered, but we really, really need people. We really need people trained up to be sort of in leadership positions, and so that they can be basically a supervisor, a lead steward each time we're out there. That's the real limiting factor. So it's not really a money issue in terms of expanding. Right now, we're doing pretty well in terms of being able to subsidize wilderness first aid for folks. We pay 50% of the cost for volunteers who are in good standing, which means you meet your day's requirement. And, if we grew a great deal and we had a lot of active volunteers, I would love, that'd be a great problem to have. The board would have to explore maybe more actively fundraising to try to, or seeking support maybe from the trust or from elsewhere to try to make sure we can cover all of those things. That's our biggest expense, is covering wilderness for, subsidizing wilderness first aid for folks. But we're pretty low cost otherwise. We ask people to pay for their shirts, and beyond that, we buy a little bit of equipment. If somebody uses some equipment, on a rescue or something and doesn't get it back, we try to replace it. So we've kept it pretty lean, and I think that served us well.
How many active volunteers do you have now?
I want to say in the 20 to 25 range.
Okay.
Scott may be gritting his teeth if I've gotten it wrong, but I think
feel free to correct us, Scott, in the chat, since we know you're here on the call. But how many more would it take to cover August?
It's really that it's really that lead steward piece. So we need volunteers and we're actively training volunteers to be able to take that supervisory role. Because, it's the balance of, you don't want to work people so much that they burn out and they give
Right.
up. So I would say, ideally we'd have, in a perfect world, I'd say at least 5 or 6 more supervisory volunteers. That's going to take some time, to build that up, but we're working on it.
Wow. How many rescues are there in a year? John wants to know.
I have had years where it feels like the helicopter flies to Old Rag every week, and I've had years where I feel like I don't see them at all. So it just varies. And of course, Logan's team covers when we're not on the mountain. So, the most I've had in a year, and it's been a number of years, has probably been 4 or 5. There's been years where I've had none.
Wow. Andy.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing quick in there as far as the leadership roles, as
Yes.
far as the supervisory roles. One of the key things to that is knowing, to a certain extent, knowing the Park Services system. You don't want to go out and extend yourself beyond where Logan would have a volunteer doing it, or any of the park people would have it. You got to know your place to a certain extent, and there's a fine line between, knowing your place and then doing your job too. And that's I guess we'd call it maturity. I guess there's a certain amount of judgment that has to be exercised there, and that's one of the challenges. I think any of the leaders and lead stewards is what they're called, really need to have a good understanding of the park and the park's policies.
Okay.
We
Logan,
really, if I could
Emily,
add just a little bit to that, we really emphasize skating our lane and not getting outside of that and not encroaching on the lane of the Park Service personnel.
Okay. Logan just let us know there were 4 so far this year, 4 rescues on Old Rag. And Scott, who is currently on the board, and I believe board chair, said last year Old Rag Mountain Stewards had 36 volunteers, 19 in good standing. And having served on committees and volunteer organizations, I understand the challenges of volunteers fulfilling their promises and being in good standing. And we hope that we'll raise people's interest enough through this that you'll get a few more volunteers. John wants to know, how close to the park do you need to live in order to volunteer?
Well, I lived in College Park, Maryland, so I am, if traffic on the north side of the Beltway and on 66 are running fine, which Saturday morning or Sunday morning when we're driving out, they usually are, it is exactly 2 hours door to parking lot.
Wow. Andy, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I live out in Western Maryland. So I now work in Shenandoah almost every day during the summer. It's 2.5 hours one way.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So I guess the question is for people considering volunteering, if the drive is something you want to factor in, that's something you get to know if you want to take this step, right, guys?
Yeah.
And I didn't know that you allow people to visit and sort of shadow you before they decide. Sorry, Emily, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, what I was going to say is, because we're a bit different than some other SAR organizations in that we have scheduled duty days. So it's not a situation where, and I'm on the call out list for ShenSAR, I almost never get to respond, because by the time I get home and I get my bag and I drive to Shenandoah, wherever Logan needs me, the incident's probably over, unless it's a multi-day incident, which fortunately those are rare. So, I wish I could help more in that arena, but just because of the distance, I don't get to do that very much. And but because we have scheduled duty days, like, you can plan around it.
Wow, that's helpful to know. Thank you. Any last words? We are closing in on our last 5 minutes. Any final comments from either Logan, Andy, or Emily? I bet the 3 of you could talk about this subject and talk to each other for much longer. I've seen that happen, but any final things you'd like our audience to know?
I would encourage everybody to get involved, because it's a great way to, as Logan said, to serve. It's a great way to increase your knowledge and also to increase your appreciation of the outdoors. I mean, Shenandoah is a very special place. Like I said, my family's been there for generations now, and it's a very special place. And There's nothing like getting to know it deep down, and also the appreciation that you develop for park staff and those people who love it just as much. Even though they've worked all over the country, they still come to Shenandoah and find that love. And the fellow volunteers, I got to tell you, meeting Emily and Scott and everybody, Ben and Gabby, everybody's just fantastic. It's just a great group of people.
Wonderful. Well said. Emily, do you have anything to add to that?
I'd like to thank you, Anna, for setting this up, and your team for setting this up, and for the opportunity to talk about Mountain Stewards. And I would agree with Andy, the people that are involved in the organization are fantastic. And we throw a mean potluck if you need moving. So.
Well, Emily and Andy, thank you for representing and letting us know about Old Rag Mountain Stewards. And Logan, you and your NPS colleagues, we thank you for your stalwart and enduring commitment to the park and to the National Park Service. It means a lot to us that you made the time to be here.
I also thank you guys for your continuous support from Andy, Emily, and from you, Anna. I will following with Andy and Emily. Volunteering is an excellent way to contribute. Personnel volunteering, that is a very critical thing that we always need help with. And what better use of your limited time to come and help protect and preserve this park for its future generations.
Well said, Logan. I'd like to thank everyone who joined us. I'd like to thank you for your wonderful questions and remind you that we've recorded it, and we are going to send out a link to this program and an email chock full of links and websites and information about the stuff we talked about. And we hope you enjoyed what we talked about today. I just want to thank the people on the call who are already giving to the trust, because what you do supports this work. So we're just really proud to do the work that we do, but we couldn't do it without you. So thank you, everybody. And signing off now, but stay tuned for more webinars to come. And thank you again, Emily, Andy, and Logan.
Thank you.
Thanks.